Greetings, invaders. My name is Scott. Today we're going to be doing a quick January wrap-up of what I read in the month of January. I read a total of 13 books. Wait a minute. Is this the right channel? Are you really watching Book Invasion? Yes, I read 13 books in the month of January. That is remarkably fantastic. But most of these books are probably 200 pages or less, which is pretty fun. Anyway, so the first book I finished in January was Dimension of Miracles by Robert Sheckley. This was kind of known as the precursor to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It has those same kind of humorous space traveling themes. But Douglas Adams had said he never read the book before he wrote Hitchhiker's Guide, but when he did read it, he saw a lot of those themes. He said it was like reading his own writing. So Dimensions of Miracles is about a guy who inadvertently wins a lottery to traverse the galaxy, the realms, but his name was kind of chosen on a computer accident, a computer error, and the reason for the error is explained here, but the character then kind of traverses through different dimensions, different realms of worlds, and he has to talk to people and try to finagle his way back home, all while trying to explain to them that he's not the right person who won the contest, and meanwhile, the real person who did win the contest is trying to get the prize, but then the main character doesn't want to give up the prize. And so I felt like this was a bit more like philosophical and psychological in the ideas of reality and home and the humanity. It had a lot of more of that philosophical feel than Hitchhiker's Guide did. Hitchhiker's Guide doesn't really touch on most of those big picture questions, but Dimension of Miracles really, you can tell either Robert Sheckley, the author, I don't know if he does or not, but it felt like he has a background in kind of psychology and what drives people. So this book really delved into a lot of those questions, all while adding a great and humorous twist to it. I felt like it was funny, it was exciting, and it had a lot of those big picture questions that really kind of made you rethink a lot of things. I gave that one 5 stars. That was a really great read for my first read of 2021. It was fantastic. The next one I read was Criterium by Tyler Jones. I was given an audio code for this book by the author. This is a horror book that was released last year, and it is kind of like a haunting of a super sweet bicycle that possesses the rider who rides it. So the character in the book had lost his father to like addiction of some sort, and he has a kind of a recurring nightmare of like a fiery body running through the street, and it was really kind of creepy and dark. And then he finds a bicycle out in the field somewhere down in his neighborhood, and that kind of takes him for a bit of a ride, so to speak, to this twisted, dark reconciliation of his past and the loss of his father. It's a really kind of deep and awesome, dark book about a bicycle that possesses the rider. That was really fun. The next one I read was It's a Bad World by Curtis M. Lawson. Curtis M. Lawson is the same guy who wrote the Black Heart Boys Choir, which I still have yet to read, but I had gotten an audio copy of this book from the author as well for review. This one I gave 4 stars. This is a kind of a dark and twisted version of like Snatch, like the movie Snatch, where there is a treasure that's up for grabs and somebody's going to sell it to this buyer. Things go awry. Some hoodlum kind of ends up with the prize, and he doesn't know what it is or what it's worth. But then he doesn't know that there are, the powers that be are out looking for this ancient relic that this drug addict kind of stumbles upon, and they're trying to find out where the guy is, where these relics are. And there's really dark and twisted, villains that are coming into play here, and torturous murderers that are after it versus like the very professional collectors who are after it at the same time. So it kind of goes into this really twisted and dark, a little bit humorous way of gathering this prize and these different factions that are after this prize. It was really fun. It reminded me a bit of like, Snatch or Lock, Stock, those kind of movies, but also with a dark and drug-addled twist with sadistic murderers in between. I guess you can say that. So I like that book. That was great. The next book I finished in January was finally I finished reading Monster by Nook and Swan. I have a review video recorder for this. I have to edit it and post it. I gave this one 5 stars. I thought it was fantastic. I really liked the action in here. I really liked the characters. Clay was one of the characters who I really liked. He was like an ex-convict. He's trapped in this post-apocalyptic world working for the bad guys, but he kind of has the heart of gold who doesn't want to work for the bad guys anymore. He wants to be out on his own. And then the ending twist of this was just a gasp, and I had to pause and be like, no way. That was pretty awesome. The ending to that book was great. So Monster by Duncan Swan. I look forward to book 2 of that. The next one I read was The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. We all kind of know The Time Machine. I listened to it on audio. I wasn't really engaged in it. Being a classic that it is, I did enjoy The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. I enjoyed kind of learning about this classical story that I have not read before, experience it kind of on audio, getting to know the character and where the origin story of this was, and his travels back to this past realm and meeting these alien people / species, and then trying to find his way back home and explaining that to his little party that he invited over. So I thought that was pretty good. The next one I read was In the Shadows of Men by Robert Jackson Bennett. This was kind of a horror novella. This one was fantastic. I gave this one 5 stars. I had gotten this from NetGalley a long time ago. It's really short. It's only 120 pages. This tells a story about a guy and his brother who bought a old old motel out in the boonies of Texas from their father, and they're renovating it now and sprucing it up and trying to make millions from like the gas boom and the oil boom out in Texas back in the day. But little do they know the sinister happenings that had happened led by their father and the small town, and they kind of get a bit of a haunting feel from this motel that they're starting to remodel. As they're tearing apart the pieces in the rooms to redecorate it, they come across like a vaulted door in the floor, and then nightmares start happening, visions start happening, sounds, voices, scary things, people dying. So this was a really cool haunting tale, In the Shadows of Men by Robert Jackson Bennett. I gave that one 5 stars. It's fantastic. Next one up, I read How Cold the Steel Hand by Jason Kilgore. This one was like 20 pages, and I had gotten this on my Kindle a long time ago. I don't know when, but this tells a story about a guy who is like the futuristic world where people can communicate through avatars, which are robots, and they can kind of mimic the movements. So you just kind of tap into your goggles, you could see through the robot's eyes, interact with people, and yada yada. Then he talks to his brother and finds out that his dad is sick, but he has this big like presentation at work, and he can't visit his father. So he visits him through his robot as he's kind of getting more and more sick and tries to talk to him that way. But his dad is very anti-technology, so he doesn't like to talk on robots. He wants to see his son in person. And so he tries to get there through the story. So it was really kind of heart-warming, heart-wrenching tale. That one I gave 5 stars to, even though it was a short and quick one, but it really kind of captures that futuristic world that's incredibly plausible, but also kind of loss and sadness and family and things like that. Next one up I read is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. This one was a really buzzed about book. I knew it was short, so I wanted to give it a try. I got it on audio. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really interesting. I loved the way that these clues played out. It was very much like a futuristic spy versus spy, where there's, a Rube Goldberg machine type of thing where things trigger things and things trigger things, and then it pops out like this clue. And I love the way that they put those together, like whether it's in the rings of trees that were planted millions of years ago, or things that you see in the tea leaves when you're drinking tea. Those were really cool. I love those. And then then it became too heavily weighed on like the trope. No spoilers. So that one I gave 4 stars to. Next up I read is A Seed in a Soil of Sorrow by Keith Anthony Baird. This one I had on my Kindle again from who knows when. This one was kind of a horror tale about a person who falls in line with a kind of cult, or tries to seek out a cult. And they infiltrate this place. They meet the cult leader, and eventually he finds a person in the cult whom he kind of falls in love with, but they can't tell anybody in the cult, and then the leader finds out and he makes people pay for their actions. This one is also short, but I felt like the violence here and the cult atmosphere was really well done. It was really kind of brooding and angry, and you were really cautious about where people were, what they were doing, and they knew they were crossing lines and breaking rules. So I gave that one 4 stars. That was a good one. Next one I read was Anoka by Shane Hawk. This one you see buzzed around on the horror booktube all the time. This one was really fantastic. I gave this 5 stars. This is about an indigenous author about the town of Anoka, where he speaks about some indigenous things that are happening and the myths that go behind them, and weaves them into this kind of fantastical horror stories. So this is a collection of stories. There's one story in here called Dead America, which really kind of got me creeped out and crawled because it had to do with spiders crawling on people's faces and eyeballs, and ugh. But there was one also about a female like werewolf, a lichen, I guess you would say. That one was awesome. And the way the intro to the book on audio has an introduction kind of by the author about the stories he wrote and why he wrote them. And then after the fact, there is also a section on the audiobook about where he covers each story individually and talks about what it's about and why he wrote it that way, which I thought was really cool. I love to get those insights from the author in the book, and I'm glad that it was included in the audiobook version as well. So Anoka by Shane Hawk, very well buzzed, very much worth it. 5-star read for me. The next book I finished was The Pulse Between Dimensions and the Desert. This one I had on my shelf for a long time. I started reading it a long time ago. It's kind of a collection of stories. I bought it essentially because the title is amazing, The Pulse Between Dimensions and the Desert, and I live in the desert, and the cover is amazing too. This is by Rios de la Luz, and this is a collection of kind of her stories, and it throws in kind of an ethnic twist to these fantastical horror stories, like a tree who eats people from their roots, and these kind of mythical happenings. It's kind of like magical realism, where it tells kind of a real story, but there's something dark, twisted, magical piece to it. So that one was really excellent. The next one I finished was The Stainless Steel Rats by Harry Harrison, classic sci-fi. This was one I did for Vintage Sci-Fi Month. This one, The Time Machine, I both did 2 of those for Vintage Sci-Fi Month in January. Stainless Steel Rat, I gave 4 stars for. I thought it was kind of fun. It was exciting. It was kind of like a heist, undercover, almost like Face Off kind of thing, where he goes in disguise and infiltrates this camp to find the leader, and he dons like a disguise and an accent and things. It was really done well in audio, like the accents that he has to do to get through these different factions of people. And then he comes up with, meeting the leader of this and other things. There's lots of twists here. You think he's on the run. You think he's lost the people who are trying to find him, but then twists happen. It was very action-packed and excellent. I gave it 4 stars. The last one I read was Scratches by Joshua Marcella. Scratches is a very dark and twisted horror novel that kind of gets darker and more sinister the further along you proceed in the book. So it just starts with a boy and his mom, single mom, divorced from an abusive husband, and her father was also an abusive person who had left this house to them to inherit. So they move into the house, and the boy kind of puts his room down in the basement. Things start happening, very spooky and violent things that don't make you want to go into a deep, dark basement all by yourself. And it gets darker and darker when you think that, the haunting's not enough. There's a reveal in there that just is pretty horrific, and then it gets scarier. The guy gets closer, the sounds and the smells were just really well done. I really liked that book. It was a very great one. I look forward to reading his next story, which I think is out already. So that was Scratches by Joshua Marcella. I gave it 4 stars. So that was my January in reading. A lot of short books, a lot of horror books. I thought they were fantastic. All were 4 stars or more, and a few for Vintage Sci-Fi Month. So let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you're going to read any of these, and hopefully you found something new that you might like. Check it out, and let me know in the comments. Bye-bye. See ya.